Step into the shadows with Paranormal M, your portal to the paranormal. Subscribe and hit that like button and explore the unexplained with us. Get ready for a thrilling adventure into the mysterious. I'm just confused and still stuck on this, I guess. In the summer of 2022, my last camping trip with my family, we went to a popular camping location in Ohio. If you can figure it out, bonus to you. My sister and I, and me, 17 at the time, and her, 14, we shared a tent. So we stayed up giggling and messing around quite a bit like Uno or talking about boys she liked. Mostly for week 1 in the 2-week trip, it was fine. We slept and talked like normal, until the second week, where things took a turn. I have a really hard time with sleeping. So when week 2 strolled around, my sister would be passed out asleep and I'd be sitting wide awake for hours at a time. While these hours where I sat awake, I heard noises, crunching, shifting, growling, and howling. The basic outdoor noises, you could say. For the next 2 days of the week, I heard a lot of walking and talking in the woods. Things like, "Come here," or "Help me." Sometimes I'd hear faint whispering near my tent. I was honestly scared shitless. And on the last 2 nights, which probably had been the worst, my sister was awake and both of us playing Uno with her phone dead and mine on a cool 20%. Around maybe 2 a.m., my sister went back to lay down, and so did I, until I heard thick footsteps around the tent. Too heavy for deer or wolves, but too light for bears or elk. It was almost like a person was walking around my tent. My sister was awake and quietly watched as someone or something pressed on the tent. Pressed on the sides, and it pressed on the door. Now, my sister and I move all the little tent zippers into our tent at night just to keep people from trying to get in. Clearly, this person or thing was looking for said zippers. So we felt pretty smart, and this was night 4 of week 2. Now, finally, week 2, night 5. The same heavy footsteps, the same touching at the walls, and the same whispering to come here and come out. Saw something when I was younger. So this happened when I was about 9 or something, I'm not completely sure. My friend and I were playing in my room with Barbies, but took a quick break when she had to pee, so I decided it would be fun to hide behind my door to scare her. When I stood up and wanted to hide behind my door, I saw some sort of creature. I always thought of it as some sort of alien, but it could be something else. It for sure didn't look human, though. I know how it looked exactly, but have a vague memory of how it looked. This is because it's been so long. When I saw it, I felt intense fear. I couldn't move or breathe, and my heart was going crazy. I don't know for how long I stood there, but eventually I walked out of my room and my friend came out of the bathroom. We both went inside my room and went to play again. At that moment, I didn't remember what happened, but still felt extremely scared. I must have looked scared too because she kept asking me if I was okay. I'm not sure when, but maybe a few days or weeks later, I started to remember what happened that day. Got extremely scared to sleep. I never told my parents and I just kept it to myself. They just had to deal with me being scared, laughing my ass off. I told my little brother a few years after it happened, but every time I talked about it or every time he would joke about it, he didn't believe me, by the way, I would freak out, and this intense fear would fill up my body. Remembering something I shouldn't be able to remember. Back when I was a small child, like 3 to 5 years, told my mom multiple times that my dad had a car accident and killed his friend, and I was there. She would put this off as, odd behavior. Not think much of it. until she once told my dad, and he was totally shocked and looked at her like an insane person. Came out that before he was with my mom, he had a girlfriend, and while driving, the car slipped and they crashed into another car where she died. There was no kid there, but we can't explain how he knew it, that it happened in the woods and that it was a crash against a tree. There were no kids in the car. It might sound crazy, but I can't remember this incident very much now. But since my parents somehow were involved with this case, stayed a bit more in my brain. I apparently talked a lot of dumb stuff like telling my mom, "Remember when I was an adult back then? I always did X, Y, or Z." Sadly, she didn't remember what exactly, and, I need some help with Beardstown, Illinois. There's a town in Illinois called Beardstown. The town is really small itself. Sundowner town that's run down and just wrong. I have stories upon stories about this place, but I need more information from people outside of my circles. The townspeople are complacent in their existence and seemingly have a jaded emotion to any mention of supernatural or just weird happenings in the town. If you happen to know anything or have any details of Cass County in general, I would appreciate any information on it. You heard him. While I'm at it, I'll share a story. I would often visit Beardstown to see my partner during my spring break. It was an escape from my life, and one of the only times that we saw each other before we moved in together. He lived with his grandparents off of US 67, heading into town by the Swift plant. The road had houses on the left and fields to the right. Closer into town was a massive cemetery across from the plant. That was the main area that we would occupy since it was a little bit out of town. I think out of all of the stories I have, a good starter might be the night the moon disappeared. A lot of things happened that night. They were kind of bizarre and just, not right. My fiancé and I were headed back from St. Louis. It was March 22nd, 2019. It was specifically a waning gibbous, and was directly behind us for the drive. We were driving through Little Indian when I noticed the moon was gone. No clouds that you could see, no stars, but no moon. We stopped at a Kanoko on the road and got out to look because it felt absolutely wrong. It was nowhere in sight, but we had to get home and it was 8 p.m. We drove into the area and was headed toward this creepy-ass church outside of town called Shiloh Church. It was abandoned and creepy and, a whole different entity. The road before and after the church is covered in thick trees and had a dip in the road. This area would have a thick fog and mist and sometimes have misty people-shaped figures just chilling in the road. We had the radio on low at like 5 or 6, just because we were a bit freaked out about everything. When we hit the dip in the road, our radio jumped up and down in volume and my fiancé turned the radio off. It immediately turned back on and the lights started flickering. The air got heavy and cold and suddenly, my fiancé slows down and then speeds up. It scared me and all he said was, "Deer." After a bit, we started getting to Beardstown. He breathes out really long and tells me what he saw. Disclaimer. I will not be saying the name of the creature. They are taboo to say. And I believe in the evoking of the name, if you know what I mean. I need help with Beardstown, Illinois, Part 2. Anyway, the spookies. These are accounts from my partner, and I mentioned in the first post for background his grandparents lived there. He would often go there for summers and breaks for school. It's unsettling and definitely informal, since these were talked about in a group chat. So there was one night when I was a kid, and I couldn't sleep. So I was sneezing out to the computer room to just go play Webkins or something silly, kid stuff. as I was walking past those big wall-to-floor windows facing the woods leading to the computer room. There was something that wasn't quite a person and wasn't quite an animal on the back porch. It was crouched, pressing its face against the glass. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that video of the rabid coyote that's snarling up against a window or a glass door and it's like smacking its muzzle into the glass all violently. It was like that. That same feeling of danger and wrongness, but little kid me was like almost hypnotized by it. It was just standing there and trying to push through the glass and would sometimes smack whatever kind of mouth it had against the window. Almost like it was trying to bite or break the glass. But eventually I snapped out of it and ran back to my room and didn't come out until morning. Another one I was present over the phone with, it was this. When we were long distance before 2020, he would call me frequently while I was doing schoolwork. It was pretty late and he calls me and says that he's having a massive shriek-like scream that happened down the road from him. If anyone's familiar with hearing a guttural scream, you know how unsettling and icing it can be. Freaked him out a bit and we heard a crash happen. He lived off of a massive highway with crop fields on either side. The fields had these rain banks that sort of ran between them and, well, that and the highway. It was about 5 to 6 feet deep. A little after the scream, we hear a crash, metal on metal of 2 cars crashing. Soon after, sirens flying from down the highway past his house. He has me on call and decides, well, as any Midwesterner would, to go see what's going on. He gets to the police barricade and they tell him to turn around. And apparently, quote-unquote, you'll hear about it in the news. And that was it. He couldn't see super well, but there was police activity all in the field yards away, looking at 2 different crumpled cars. The next morning he goes out, and while the wreck was cleared, there was still debris. There were signs of 2 cars being there deep into the fields like they had been tossed or thrown. No real news happened on it at all besides town rumors that drug deal went wrong was the only explanation. Date was December 27th, 2019. This is an account by a few of us on this note from our document that we share. The airport runway that goes on with, no end at night is just like woods and surrounding grass. It pulls you towards it. Strange shadows in the grass, you could say. There's an old airstrip near my partner's home at the time. It's one of those small private aircraft runways with a few hangars and little to no security at all. The runway is planted in a field with lots of wood surrounding it. I've been to the airstrip a few times, and every time it was not fun. It scared me straight out of the gate. It was eerie and too silent to be in the woods. We've had a few interesting things happen, but the main one was not being able to walk to the end at night. On foot, you'd be able to walk to the end of the strip in about 5 to 10 minutes, and during the day, in the car, both at night and day. On foot, we had never been able to reach the end at night. We had walked it several times, just the 2 of us or in a group with other friends, and every time we could walk for what felt like hours with the dim lights of the runway stretching into the distance. Never growing closer to this end. A few of our friends reported feelings of dizziness or wrongness in these walks. My partner told me stories about a junkyard that was also back in the same woods behind his grandparents' house. No fence, no security. Nobody else ever there. But there were cars or chunks of cars. I felt the presence of my recently deceased cat. I lost my precious cat, Peter, last week. He always followed me or my fiancée around our apartment. He was 100% a COVID cat through and through. He always wanted to be around us. If we wanted to shut him out of the room, he and his brother would throw a fit outside our door. If we failed to shut a door fully, he would be there to headbutt it open. He had so many quirks about him that I loved. even the annoying ones. One example of a quirk that he had was his constant need to wake me up every single morning. Even if he had food in his bowl, he would go straight to my office trash can and start knocking it down. I'd have to drag my ass out of bed just to watch him eat in the morning. At the time, it was so annoying, but in retrospect, I kind of miss it so much. Peter was something else. Sadly, due to some very, very tragic circumstances, I had to euthanize my boy out of the blue. It was one of the hardest things I've ever been through. I've had to euthanize 2 other cats before, and while they were both tragic, this one hit me like a truck. I haven't been able to do anything around my apartment without it instantly reminding me of him. I've never grieved so hard. Yesterday I was getting ready to leave my place to meet my fiancée for lunch. I went into my bedroom to quickly grab my water bottle. I failed to shut the door behind me, leaving it slightly ajar. I grabbed my water bottle, and when I turned, the door cracked open just enough for a kitty to slip through. At the time, I figured it was his equally attached brother, Charlie. When I opened the door to check Charlie, he was across the hall cleaning himself on his back. I was instantly taken aback. I closed the door the rest of the way behind me and walked towards Charlie and started petting him. Kind of dismissing the door opening to AC pressure or the latch pushing it open. That was until Charlie's ears perked up and he stared directly at the bottom corner of the bedroom door for about 3 seconds. I looked and, of course, didn't see anything, but I felt an instant warmth over. I don't know what to think, but I may have encountered a ghost. It started with my significant other, and I'll call them J.A. for short. J.A. has been through the most trauma I've seen a person go through. I won't go into specifics of the trauma, but it's horrific at times of their life, and I try my best to help them through coping with all of it. Each time they're depressed or suicidal, an apparition appears called Tommy Cade. They kind of just go by Tommy. I just first started knowing about this apparition as of last night. J.A. can hear him and can see him at only the worst parts of their depression or coping with the trauma. We both thought this apparition was a result of trauma and that he or it was a reaction to trauma. That was until I started asking questions to Tommy. According to J.A., Tommy said that he had a brother named Samuel. The mother named Meredith and dad was named Harrison, and his full name was Tommy Marcus Cade Jr. I don't believe in ghosts and still don't, but what happened after boggled my mind. I told J.A. to go into the other room and for me to talk to Tommy alone. I said something like Red Rover. J.A. came back into the room and said Tommy had said Red Clover. Thought in my head, okay, she just somehow heard the mumbles of me talking. So we tried again. She went even further, about 3 rooms away, and said something to Tommy. We did this 3 more times, and each time she would get it right. We asked her brother to check and make sure that she was far enough and had her ears shut with her hands. Still, when she came back in blue Ford, orange Hippo, etc., she would get it right. So we tried another test. We had her sit in a corner looking away and closed her eyes. Tommy would tell her how many fingers I was holding. We tried a couple, and 90% of the time, AJ would get the amount right. We tried this 2 more times, and this time with a pillow to her face. I gave generic numbers, and then I gave a thumbs up, and I shit you not that she said 1 thumb up. Weird, right? We tried again, and I gave her double middle finger, and I shit you not, 2 fingers gives Tommy the bird. Well, I'm in all honesty just confused and astonished. I don't think we could ever prove ghosts like in movies exist or spirits in religion, but this is not normal, right? Like I feel like I'm losing my mind. Have I scientifically proven something unnatural? I wouldn't say proved, but at least tested to raise suspicion. If so, how many tests should I do? How much evidence to show probability likelihood that it would kind of throw coincidence out the window? How much data would I need, and how would I publish such a paper? I would obviously need to get more people to observe and spectate and validate. Well, how would I go forward and do that? You can believe whatever you want to believe, read this or not, but as a man of science, how do I satisfy this itch in the back of my brain that something somewhere could exist? Also, Tommy claims to be from 1870 to 1890, and to be 13 years old. My personal experiences with paranormal things. It was very late. I was visiting a friend. I was at his parents' house. It's a very small village near a larger city. Incredibly quiet area, no sounds. He told me many times that a specific time in the evening was when he would walk alone or with his girlfriend, and a woman's laughter would be heard. One day he walked through a field to a place where he heard laughter and voices. The only thing he found was a cross stuck in a tree. The next day he asked his parents if something had happened here, but no one knew the history of this place. Coming to the point. Several times I decided that we were near this place at a specific time, but nothing happened, and that very day I was visiting him. It was very late and I decided that maybe he would walk me a short distance toward my house. I'll continue on foot. We stood in front of the gate of his house. We heard rustling in the neighbor's yard 5 meters away from us, as if somebody was moving there. At one point, a green cloud shot up with the outlines of a human figure. She flew for 3 seconds high above our heads and disappeared. We were completely shocked, even though I consider myself a psychic. I've seen a lot of strange, inexplicable things in my life. I know I attract these things. It was the most powerful event I've ever experienced. And I've never experienced such close contact with something inexplicable. Personally, for many years, my friend and I traveled around the country to abandoned places. Urbex, like the atmosphere of forgotten places. Bonus story. I go cycling with another friend some summer day. We didn't make it back before sunset, and it was completely dark. We were in a complete wilderness. At one point, a 3 or 4 meter tall figure ran across our path. It was a shadow, but it happened completely silently. No steps, nothing. The fields around us were cultivated after harvest, so this figure didn't run into the wheat or anything like that. She just disappeared. Big, flat, empty fields around us, no bushes. I just looked at my friend and asked if he had seen it too. He confirmed. Yet another situation with my friends. We decided that we would go for a walk in the forest, in a completely remote area. There are lots of small villages and forests around my city. Without extending the story, when we entered the forest, we heard the cracking of branches getting closer and closer to us. We thought it was probably a large animal, so we retreated. The road from the forest through the field led to the village. It's about 2 kilometers away. The moon was shining very brightly, so despite the darkness, it was possible to recognize where we were heading and what was surrounding us mostly. At some point, I heard somebody walking to my right, but both friends were to my left. The first thing that happened that scared us. We heard radio sounds as if somebody was communicating with someone, completely incomprehensible. We immediately... What experience turned you or somebody you know from a skeptic to a believer? I've always been a believer, as the home I grew up in was rife with activity. However, my boyfriend was a complete skeptic until recently. We went on a group paranormal investigation at a location called Dead Woman's Ditch. He went into this as a complete skeptic, mind you. He'd booked this as a surprise for me. That's because I love the paranormal, but he expected it to be nonsense. But a night of tricks and silliness nonetheless. During a dowsing rod session where 8 of us were using the rods, the lead of the investigation asked if any present spirit could use the rods to point to where they were. Simultaneously, all the rods pointed to a gap in the circle. That's where we stood. There was no wind, they all moved at the same time and at the same speed, and they all pointed to exactly the same spot. What helped solidify this was the fact that they all had to move in different directions in order to point to this spot. Some people had brought their own rods, and the lead investigator had his hands visible during this. Luckily, my boyfriend was one of the people holding the rods and said that it felt the fireside and its happenings in Montana. So my family used to own a small restaurant and barn. It's in Sims, Montana. It was the main draw of the whole town because it was one of the first things you saw going down the highway. That and a gas station, and obviously seeing a restaurant on a long drive was appealing. The fireside passed through many hands while I lived in that town, so it was very exciting at the age of 7 to learn from my grandmother that she had bought it from the previous owner, and that the whole family would be moving in. So I need to explain the layout of the place so you can understand where things happened. When you walk through the front door, you have the restaurant to your left and the bar to your right. At the front of the restaurant, half was a counter to give your order. Behind that in the bar was the kitchen and the freezer. And past that, rather, was the house section. That's where my whole family lived. Lastly, at least to the left of the counter, was a more fancy dining room with red carpet and wooden chairs and soft red padding on them. In total, there were 3 ghosts in the fireside. I say 3, but only 2 of them were ghosts and the last one was something else. I'll speak about each one and the encounters me and my family had separately. The first ghost was always at the end bar and would randomly show up and disappear. Even some customers saw him. He wasn't creepy or frightening, but was rather very friendly. I remember one time I was walking around and saw him out of the corner of my eye. He'd looked up at me and smiled and vanished. He appeared to be like a farmhand, given his attire with work boots, denim jacket, pants, and a hat. He also had a rather old and long gray beard. We don't think he died there, but resides there because it was a place he enjoyed in life. I don't have many stories about this ghost because really all he did was sit at the end of the bar, but he was a welcome present guest. The second ghost was an older woman. She was always in the kitchen and behind the bar. She was very kindly and sweet dressed in an outfit that seemed to be maybe placing her in like 1841. Some encounters I remember was once I was in the kitchen being a dumb kid. I was running around and nearly tripped, but a hand caught me, placed me back on my feet. Turning around, I saw a glimpse of her smiling at me. And me being a kid, I smiled back at her even though I couldn't see her anymore. I also remember saying thank you. Another encounter was one my grandmother had. She was in the kitchen cooking something, I can't remember, but washing dishes. She had a pot on the stove when suddenly when looking to her left, she saw the woman looking at the stove and said, "It's gonna burn, love." To which my grandmother turned to the stove and saw indeed it was beginning to burn. She quickly removed it from the hot top and turned off the stove, and upon looking back at the woman, she was gone. I enjoyed having her around, and my family definitely agreed. She was very sweet. But my father said one time he swore that she put on us like a saffron on the counter next to him while they were cooking, and, well, no one tells him how to cook. The last thing was in a fancy dinner room. That was on the far left corner. But unlike the other two, it moved wherever it wished, and we all hated that damn thing. My mother would not go into the dining room herself because it scared the hell out of her. It just sat there sometimes in the perfect spot, like where no light reached, and we would always pray that it just didn't look at us, because even that was just too much. One encounter I have was when me and my little brother were in the dining room playing the Pac-Man game that was in there. My brother began pulling on his shirt, but I thought he wanted his turn. But I was so close to winning, but when he spoke, I could tell he was scared. I turned around and saw that thing rocking back and forth in a chair. It wasn't looking at us. I quickly grabbed my brother's hand and ran out of the room. Another one I had was when I was in my room late at night. I had woke up in the middle of the night and got the feeling that something was looking at me. So I looked up at my door, and standing in the doorway was that thing. It was somehow so dark that the darkness around it seemed so much brighter. Then it looked up at me. Its eyes were pale, white, and the feeling I got made me want to puke. I quickly hid under the covers and somehow managed to fall back asleep. My grandmother had an encounter with it once. She didn't see it, but when she was in the area right in front of the bar, mopping up when she had pushed to the ground. She literally got pushed to the ground, and when she looked up, there was nothing there. The most passive encounter with it was with my mom and dad, and they were sitting at one of the regular tables in the main restaurant area after my seen a white figure go by my living room window. Anyone know? A couple of weeks ago, my wife tells me she saw a white figure with a white jacket, went by the window going up a few steps onto the deck and to the front door. She thought it was me coming in the house, but the door never opened, and I don't own a white jacket. I tried to think of things that it could have been. Across the street, another road intersects, and headlights shine between our house and the garage to the steps and deck. This encounter happened at night. She brushed it off and kind of mostly forgot about it. A couple of days ago, I saw the same thing. I was sitting in the living room facing the same window and thought my mother-in-law was coming in. Then remembered she was wearing a pink bathrobe. This one happened during the day and the door never opened. I'm not really sure what to think about it or if the color white means anything, and what do I know? It's definitely not a light or reflection, though. It's distinctively a person in all white walking up the steps. There was absolutely no feeling of fear or terror or anything threatening. I've heard of residual haunting where a spirit just repeats an old routine. But the thing is, this summer I took apart the old deck and built a bigger one, and the steps are not where they used to be. Whatever this is knows to use the new steps. Platform encounter in a Liverpool underground station. Several years ago, I was waiting for a train to take me from Mooresfield Station to Lime Street Station. They're both in Liverpool, in the UK. I was waiting on the Northern Line platform, which was quiet as only myself and a handful of other passengers were waiting for the delayed train to arrive. That was whilst I was on my phone talking to my wife. It's common for the station to be quieter during the day as it's located within the business district of the city. The time was around 11. That was on a Thursday. I know that it was a Thursday as I was on my way to Lime Street to change trains to get to a hospital appointment with my specialist, who only works on Broad Green Hospital on that day. I was slowly making my way up and down the platform, and as I waited, I was staring aimlessly into the vast darkness of the tunnel from which my train was now overdue by several minutes. I was talking to my wife on the phone as I heard running from behind me. I carried on with my conversation as I never really thought anything strange about it initially, and it was quite a distance away from me that time, so I never even turned around or gave it a second thought at first. I was near the end of the platform and the footsteps got closer and louder. So I turned around and I find nobody near me, and the noises continued until they passed by me. They faded as they carried on into the tunnel. My blood ran cold as I relayed the incident to my wife. Couldn't stop thinking about it until I got home. New apartment with unknown roomie. So I moved into this apartment about 2 weeks ago. I've come to terms with the fact that I have a roomie. The problem lies with the fact that I think it doesn't like me. I'm trying to make light of it, but I'm honestly scared. So it all started when I moved in, to be honest. I knew there was a presence, but it seemed more curious than anything. I didn't feel threatened or anything, just that I was being watched sometimes. I've always felt presences even as a kid though, so this wasn't a new or surprising feeling. It wasn't until a few nights ago where I felt threatened, for lack of a better term. I went up the stairs, 2-floor townhouse, and I was greeted with one of my shoes on the stairs, which was strange as I left it around the corner. My cat was by my feet the entire time I was downstairs. I then looked down the stairs, felt like I was suddenly in a place I wasn't supposed to be in, as if I was being watched by something that wanted me to leave. I went into my room and left the door cracked for my cat, but the entire rest of the night I would peek over and feel like it was staring at me. Called my girlfriend and talked to her for a bit, but still, I felt like I was being told, "Don't leave this room. You're not allowed to leave this room." It was stern, but maybe not violent. Then in the morning I found a little wall hook in the toe part of that same shoe, which was impossible because it was downstairs and my cat doesn't carry things and place them in shoes. Good cat. So then last night was fine until I left my room to look for my cat. Once I entered back, I know it watched me for hours. I would hear moving, and then at 3:06 a.m. I heard 3 knocks and taps. I was mad, and I felt like if I had left my room again, I would have been hurt. My cat is also now starting to act strange. Hatman, human negative spirit or multi-dimensional entity. I saw what might be the Hatman at 8 p.m. That was while I was wide awake in a public building, so definitely not in any type of unconscious state. Also, a group of about a dozen people were there, but I was standing off to the side. That's when suddenly I saw a flicker out of the corner of my eye. Caught my attention. I turned and noticed the window was completely blacked out, as if a large shadow covered it, as if the sun was out and got blotted out by a rain cloud. This shadow then lifted, and suddenly, about 20 feet away, I saw a tall, completely solid black figure with the shape of what looked like a large fedora, and that came along with a large overcoat, just nonchalantly walking across the lawn as if it was just taking his nightly stroll. Then it vanished after a solid 4 to 5 seconds. I've had a ton of paranormal experiences, some very extreme, but that was the first time I've ever seen a full-body apparition so clearly. I was walking across one of those pebblestone lawns that was well lit, so I know I didn't get it mixed up with another shadow. There were no trees or large bushes. It was so clear it was like viewing a painting of a black figure on a white canvas. I never even heard of the Hatman until I came to Reddit over a year ago, replying to someone's post describing what I saw. All of a sudden, I got all these replies about the Hatman. One person described it perfectly. It looks like the burglar you would see on one of those neighborhood watch programs and no trespassing signs. But did I see the Hatman? 2 years after that experience, I came across a picture that completely caught me off guard, shocked me. In that building, I mentioned a woman that was executed there, along with her husband. This woman I had prior knowledge of, for she was an infamous killer. Her husband was also executed there, but hardly anybody knows about it due to the sensationalism of his wife for, well, quite a long time ago when female killers were sort of unheard of. In this photo, he was wearing a large overcoat with a large fedora-type hat. My blood running cold, I knew instantly that it was him, or rather his apparition. So I perhaps made a mistake. It wasn't the Hatman that I saw, but rather just had a weird feeling. So this encounter's not scary, just weird. But some would say it's all in my head. But I do believe there's a spirit that's watching me and my family. So this happened today at 1 a.m. I was trying to lay down and sleep, and then I heard my doorknob slightly moved as somebody touched it without the doorknob turning. I waited for a second, assuming my, parents or brothers were going to open the door for my younger dog to come to bed with me. It was utter silence, so I assumed it was in my head. I did hear voices 30 minutes earlier, what sounded like a lady when I was walking in my room with the light on. It was such a strange sound, like somebody saying, "ah," but just faintly and a little scary. Thought it could have been my neighbor's cat or a person from outside who was on drugs or something. Brushed it off and, couldn't go to sleep. So I watched Super Nanny videos on YouTube. Then I heard the doorknob slightly move again, so I turned off my phone thinking somebody's actually going to come in this time. Wait a couple of seconds and nothing. I get up to open my door and see that no one is near the door, not even my younger dog who usually scratches at it. The oldest dog is sitting in his bed laying down staring at me. I know it wasn't him making any noises because he has long nails that scratch on the ground and he's kind of fat, so he sounds like a horse walking. It wasn't my brother's because I don't hear video games playing in the rooms, they are pretty much dark. I could hear my parents' TV on and open their door to just, they were awake watching TV. I told them about my doorknob and they asked if it was my older brother. I said, "No, he's asleep. I can hear him snoring." They told me to get my younger dog with me to go to bed so I could feel safe. I realized earlier that she wasn't in the living room sleeping like she usually does when she, doesn't feel like sleeping in my room. She was in my older brother's room the whole time, so I knew it couldn't have been her. Other experiences while living here for almost 3 years are our dog, Shadow Man with the Hat. When I was at least 11 years old or so, I'm at my great-aunt's house spending the night with my cousins. My older cousin's room, we're in there, watching kid movies on the VHS, and she was gone at a friend's house spending the night. Me and my favorite cousin were on the bed while my brother and little cousin were on the ground watching the movie. I guess I somehow fell asleep without remembering that I laid down or even closed my eyes. That's because I wake up in the middle of the night laying still on the bed when I see in the middle of the hallway floating near the chandelier a shadow-like man with those old-fashioned hats. Whenever I blinked, he disappeared. Now, he was in the mirror where it looked like he was standing next to my brother and little cousin. I blink again, and it's standing right next to me. I closed my eyes and oddly fell back asleep right away. At first, I thought it was a dream, but realized it couldn't be if I saw that my brother and little cousin were sleeping on the floor, which I didn't know was going to happen because I assumed they were just going to watch the movie with us and then go to sleep in the living room like usual. I told my aunt about it. My older cousin believed me, talked about how they had paranormal things happen to them. Spirits in my home. But let me tell you the weirdest thing that's happened in our house. It was built in the 50s. When we first moved in, I thought I heard what sounded like my mom calling my name, and, when I went into her room, she said she didn't. It even happened to my dad saying that he thought he heard her calling his name. Many occasions, my dogs have growled in the corner of my room or my parents' closet for no apparent reason. A couple of times the kitchen cabinets are wide open even though my mom closed them. Then when my grandma moved in, she saw a white figure pass by my parents' room, assuming it was her son, but my dad was outside the whole time. I was in my room doing something, and then my mom calls my name asking if I'm in the room. I shout out that I am, and she tells me her and my grandma were sitting on the couch and both of them saw someone in white pass by her bedroom. They thought it was me for a moment because I had white pants on. In my room, my grandma saw one of my beauty blenders on my makeup drawer just unexpectedly pop off and hit the ground. The scariest experience I've had It was early in the morning. I hear my oldest brother getting ready for work. I hear him open the door for my dog and come to sleep in the bed. I call her name to lay down as I'm falling asleep, and I feel a light poke near my shoulder. I freeze in fear, and I feel my dog near my feet. But I assume in that second it's my brother in the room, but all I hear is silence. The next day I ask if he can come to my room, and I just got poked, and he gave me a look and said, "No, he never went into my room. He just opened the door for the dog." My mom downloaded a ghost app so we can talk to spirits to see who's in our home. We did have someone with a female name wanting justice for her death, and another time we tried it with a different female. Air Force Demon Possession at Golf 1. I've been asked over the past 6 years to retell this story over and over by other airmen, so I feel it's necessary to share it with everyone. We were stationed at F.E. Warren, which is a nuclear weapon-oriented base to say the least. The weapons are always stored off in the middle of, bumfuck nowhere, usually with nothing but flat dirt roads and cornfields for as long as the eye can see. You could watch your dog run away for 2 days. Fast forward to my fire team sort of talking up this haunted school, less than a mile away. My dog is barking. I get amped and persuade the FSC to let us sight off to the school. He lets us go since he felt it was necessary to see this place. So we prepared the trip by ensuring all of our NVGs, thermals, and our flashlights were highly operational, because somebody said ghosts drain batteries. We hop in a truck and make our way. The first thing we notice upon approaching this old decrepit school was that something from the deep dark was absolutely screeching at us. It was screeching so loudly that it almost didn't seem real. Turns out it was an owl in a pipe that was projecting a screech. My fire team partner, Saldivar, he points out that owls are a bad omen in his religion. Crap. The only entrance point is the front door that's been busted wide open from all the storms. We enter into the main hallway. It's long, dark, dank, but definitely not alone. Immediately in front of us is the auditorium, had a bloody owl shredded to bits in the direct center. The four of us are huddled together when my fire team leader, Curtis, sees something run from the auditorium that we're standing in. Ran down the hallway, like a shadow. That's what I remember him saying. We walk down to the end of that terrifying hallway and come to the entrance to this notorious basement. I was walking through and I just continually looked over my shoulder because something kept touching my neck softly. My spine is shivering cold. My entire body is hot as fire. Made no sense at all. Blood is scribbled poorly on the walls, spelling out the phrase, "Get out." Well, okay then. I try to act like this isn't terrifying and tell the boys to head up. We get back up to the top and lo and behold, there's a giant opened maintenance shaft in the wall right at the entrance to the basement. And it wasn't open. Walk back to entry of the hallway and attempt to turn on the devices that we had. NVGs were on low battery. What? This is where it gets weird. We're in a line formation, basically four dudes crapping their pants in a row, staring off into this dark, horrifying, long hallway. We get the thermals up, and basically we make out these two tiny, tiny glowing balls that are basically at the end of the hallway, just intertwining with one another. We pass the thermals back and forth, debating whether it's a spirit or dust picking up low light. We conclude that it was not dust, as we could clearly see dust around these glowing balls. The glowing balls stop moving, stand still all of a sudden. Thermals die, NVGs die. From the deepest part of the hallway, a ceramic plate flies straight at us and shatters loudly at our feet. We panic, and in the confusion we separate. I bolt straight through what's left of the door, tearing it off the wall. One of the other two guys, Saldivar, he just went into the auditorium. Bad idea. He doesn't come out for a solid 2 minutes of terror. We all link up and absolutely sprint back to our driver, who is patiently waiting in the truck, to tell him to floor it. We're hyperventilating and can't process the feeling of terror that we just encountered. We approach the gate to Golf 1, and the radio starts acting up, changing dial to the static station and then cranking itself to the max. Now, I feel that I'm a calm person and kind of a rational human being, but I falcon punched that radio so hard it broke. We get into the station and tell the FSC what went down. He notices that our gunners, Saldivar, is just acting weird and quiet. We calm down and try to settle for the rest of our long 14-hour shifts into the morning. After an hour, we all notice that Saldivar's strangeness is now concerning. He was staring at a blank wall for more than an hour, muttering. We went up to the FSC desk, brought the concerns to him. I tell him that I'm not a religious man, but I think we desperately need to pray with him now, that I think he's going to harm himself. Saldivar's a great happy dude. We know it was the spirit. We walk out past 2 secured doors, 2 separate rooms, to see Saldivar slowly turning his head from the blank wall, smile, and say, "I don't want you to pray for me, and I'm not going to harm myself." I pooped my pants right there. This was not my friend, and it's not humanly possible to have heard our conversation. We get an alarm activation at one of our sites, always a rabbit or something, and I'm seriously worried. It's a long drive to the site, so I'm just drilling him with questions about what's going on, mostly met with hostility. While on site, I conduct the exterior walk-around, and this is where Saldivar, who's been watching us off-site at the HMVV with the thermals, yells at me to stop walking. That's when he tells me that there is a red figure following over me. Friend's spirit or mental break. So in order to understand this story, I have to rewind all the way back to when I was in the 1st grade. I had a friend named Blanca. The thing that amused me about Blanca was that, her name matched her appearance. She was pale, and when I say pale, I'm talking she could have stood by a wall and maybe she'd blend in. Her dark brown hair with straight-cut bangs contrasted this, making it more dramatic. She had or has a twin, but I don't remember the twin's name. Blanca didn't really speak ever, but we were just always kind of together at school. She did speak once that I remember. That was her counting pennies. 1, 2, 3, 4. She continued until she got to 100. She was so happy to have $1 in pennies. Very nice. I moved after the 1st grade, and this was the year 2000, so we didn't have cell phones. We didn't stay in touch. Fast forward roughly 7 years. I was in middle school. I began having this reoccurring nightmare. And in this dream, I was sitting on a swing in one of those tree swings that's really just a piece of wood on some rope. I was facing a fence that had a hole in it. I could see a back door and a girl who looked like Blanca, but she was exiting the house, and from behind her, a man stepped out and ended her life via a bullet to the head. I'd wake up at that point. I was a little edgy kid who brought up the dumb idea to have a seance. Stupidly enough, me, 2 cousins, and my sister agreed to hold it in my bedroom. We didn't have a Ouija board, so I think we just lit some candles, sat in a circle, and in the almost dark and just kind of chanted something. The candles were blown out, and we panicked, ran out of the room. I decided not to sleep in my room and opted to sleep in the family room for maybe a week. I was honestly too scared thinking of if my room was haunted. When I did return to sleeping in my room, all was peaceful for a while. But then it started happening, the feeling that I was being watched. Every now and then as I was trying to sleep, I'd get that feeling. When I looked, it would be a girl in the corner of my room, and she looked exactly like Blanca. And I mean 6-year-old her, like since I didn't know her long enough to see her age. She would stand in the corner with her head down. One night I asked, "What do you want?" To which she simply looked at me. She looked miserable. But then she just disappeared. Over the next year or so, I would also get the same feeling for different reasons. I would open my eyes one night to see a bunch of men in suits and top hats just staring down at me in my bed. Blank expressions. They surrounded my bed. I quickly closed my eyes and pretended to sleep for fear of them doing something to me if I looked at them too long. Fast forward another 3 years, and I now live in a new house. I shared a bedroom with my little sister at that time. One night as I was trying to sleep, and my sister was already sound asleep in her bed across the room, I looked over to my sister's bed. I saw the same
poster fire, the Bot Hell House. Spring 2014. Not that many poltergeist survivors can say that they witnessed seeing a poltergeist flee the scene of a crime. By crime, I mean arson. Well, I can. On one of the most horrifying events I faced while living in the Bot Hell home was the day the poster caught fire in my office. Recap. Tina and I had witnessed a lot of activity in the weeks leading up to the poster catching fire. I'm talking about bar stools being thrown. Our bedroom light was going off and turned back on by itself in the middle of our sleeping. Loud bangs, loud footsteps, door slams, and yes, one Bible catching fire. All of that happened within a week of the story I'm about to tell you. The advice given to us by friends and family was to smudge the house. The internet said the same thing. Smudging lessens the activity, quote unquote. But let me tell you, smudging never lessened the activity. Not in our house. It made it worse. This story is proof of that, in fact. The night before the poster caught fire, I asked Tina if she would feel comfortable smudging the house. Tina's an excellent smudge person. Tina's more thorough, you could say, than me. She smudges every nook and cranny. The next day, we woke up and got ourselves ready for work. Nothing unusual about that, except the house was still smelling like burnt sage, which I thought was good. Your house should smell like sage if you smudged the night before. I later found out that smudging before going to bed is dangerous, extremely dangerous. I compared smudging before going to bed to kicking an open fire ant house bed before having a picnic. Tina and I got up that morning, and we did what we always do. We got ready for work. The feeling of being watched is lessened. 30-odd minutes later of us waking up, Tina walks up to me and kisses me goodbye. Now it's just me in the house. The only thing on my mind now is beating Seattle traffic. I gotta get out of this house and get to work. A few minutes after I stepped into the shower, it happened. The devil arrived. Every fire alarm in the house starts going off. I'm standing in the doorway of my bathroom, half dried off, thinking, oh shit, it is happening. I knew right then that something was up. I didn't know what specifically, not yet anyway. Something's up though, and it's not good. I remember running through the master bedroom and reaching our bedroom doorway, and that's when I saw it. I feel a large mass run right by me. I can't see what ran past me. I can only feel it, and it was huge, taller than me and wider than me. All I could hear besides the fire alarms going off was this loud stomping sound. My eyes and ears turned toward the direction of the stomping noise and followed it downstairs, and suddenly, the front of the house opens wide and slams shut. That is it. The door just opens wide on its own and slams shut. That's when my brain says, "Give chase, Keith, give chase." I'm thinking, give chase to what? I still haven't determined if someone was even in the house. I haven't even seen anything. The door just opened and closed on its own. What am I chasing? So, I do what my brain says. I run down the stairs and reach the front door. I should be able to get a good glimpse of the intruder as he's leaving the house. I throw my hand on the front doorknob and nothing happens. The front door does not open. Correction, though. The front door doesn't budge, not even a centimeter. I must have fought with the doorknob for about 2 seconds before realizing that I had a fire to deal with. Smoke is billowing from my office upstairs. I run to my office and there it is, ladies and gentlemen. There is a fire. The wall behind my computer desk is on fire. The poster specifically. How many seconds could have transpired between the fire alarm going off and where I'm standing now? Maybe 30 seconds? The first thing I do is kill the fire and toss my damp towel over it. The fire didn't put up a fight, it was just gone. I turn up and run downstairs again. The house is filled with smoke. I get to the front door and try to open the front door again. Nothing. The door will not budge. This is the same door I saw open less than a minute ago. The doorway felt like it had been welded shut. The fire alarms are still wailing in the background. I can taste the chemicals from my burnt poster in my mouth and nostrils. And that's when it dawned on me. The house is not the one under attack. I am. Think carefully about it, Keith. The next few decisions could be your last. What are you going to do? I was in shock at this strange stage, because I remember the events vaguely at this point. Suddenly I'm on the phone with the 911 operator. I'm screaming at her that the house is on fire, and she's maintaining her level of professionalism in the process, asking me in a calm voice, "What's the address?" Every time I utter my address through the phone, enormous amounts of static break out. I'm talking about loud electrical interference, not just static. We go through this, "I can't hear you, can you repeat the address?" routine for about 30 seconds. Finally, she gets my address, and in doing so, lets me know that the fire department's on the way. I hang up and call Tina. Thank God she answers. Tina can hear the fire alarm screaming through the phone. I blurt out for her to come back home. Come back home. The house is under attack, and I hang up. The front door, for reasons I can't explain, finally opened. It opened within seconds of the fire department arriving. How ironic. The firemen dart in and, at my urging, proceed up toward the office. They said I did a good job putting the poster fire out. Tina runs into the house a minute after they arrived and grabs me. I was half naked and shaking like a leaf because all I could remember was Tina throwing blankets over me. I'm shivering and shaking like a wet puppy. I'm not afraid to admit that I was crying and quivering like a baby, too. You would have thought somebody had doused me in a tub of ice water, cubes and all. That's how cold I was. The fire department never could determine what caused the fire. Tina and I knew. This is the second fire incident that we've experienced. Note, there will be 2 more fire incidents in that house in the coming weeks. When the fire department left, all Tina and I had now was each other. The demons who did this are still here, snickering at us. Whatever ran past me in the upstairs hallway had to have been the ringleader. I'll always remember what I felt as it ran past me. Evil. Diabolical evil. Neither of us could think of a solution to our problem at all. The only thing left to do now is to contact the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church that up to this point has been ignoring us, giving us the runaround. That's the only logical thing to do now, right? Who else can help us? Tina and I looked at each other and reached the same conclusion. We're marching down to the local parish office, and we are not leaving until somebody sees us.